All right, guys, what is going on? Welcome to another quick video for you. Very long one for me. So we are here with the McLaren 12C. Today we're going to be performing a pretty extensive surgery, and that is because we have to replace the unit that is called the APMU. And right now, don't ask me what it stands for. I believe it stands for Automatic Pressure Monitoring Unit. I could be wrong. Basically, this is the unit that controls hydraulic pressure for the suspension itself. This is so when you are driving the vehicle and you turn on the active panel right down there, you can switch between handling modes for normal, sport, track, same thing with the powertrain. All of that controls because the steering is also hydraulic, so that controls the feel of the steering, controls the stiffness, roll of the suspension itself, and of course it has to do with the air brake. So all of that is connected, as well as the power steering. When that unit goes wrong, you're gonna get a PCC error. Typically, normally that's two things. It's either gonna be the accumulators, which if you have followed my channel, we've already done in a previous video. So we put brand new ones. I thought the old ones were still okay. It worked for a while, but now it's gone back. So after trying to repressurize the system using my buddies from Supercar Garage, ATL, Kevin's McLaren Diagnostics Software and tool, we were not able to repressurize. It kept giving us a error that valve C, I believe it is stuck. So I took out the old one and basically checked to see if we could get some, wattage, voltage through there. So I checked the ohms, I checked, and it seemed to be working okay, but we've checked everything else. We've checked the fluid levels, which of course should be one of the very first things that you do. And we've topped it off, we've drained it, we've done all that, still not getting any solution. So the next step is to replace the APMU. So this is pretty straightforward. It's much easier if you have a lift, but normally you're going to take this out. I'm not going to show you this because we've shown it in other videos, and it's pretty simple to Google. But this comes out, you're going to have plastic screws and two Torx. I think they're T24 or T28, which are the ones that go right here. Remove all this. You're going to remove this little front inner liner, and I'll show you. You're going to remove the battery, and then you have the APMU. Typically, if you do this on a lift, some people can drop the subframe if they want. That is very expensive. So what we're going to do is go the cheat way, because I don't have a lift, as you can see here in the garage. So we're going to do it through here, and the way you do it is I'll show you. Remove the battery. You have to undo several little screws, and then you have to kind of slide the APMU after you remove the hydraulic lines. So anyways, we'll get to it and I'll show you. All right, guys, we have removed the inner liner. So if you have a McLaren Diagnostics tool, which most people won't, you normally want to put the system into maintenance mode. I don't, so it's already broken anyways. So the next thing is to get all this fluid, as much as you can, out of the system, because what happens is the APMU gets its fluid from this little reservoir right here. That hose goes right into the APMU. That's your power steering, and basically feeds the suspension, the air brake, everything's connected. So bowl right here, and I'm gonna take basically a little turkey baster. I forget what this thing's called. There's a little filter in there you want to remove, just to catch debris. I don't know if you can see that in there with the camera. But I'm gonna take this and basically empty as much of that fluid as I can, because for one, that fluid is like $35, $30. I apologize for the mess here, but just so you guys can see what it is, it's the CHF 202. That's what the manual recommends. There is a newer version. It's the green can. It's by Pentacin is the company. You can see it right there. And the new one is 212 maybe. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the difference is that I think the new one is full synthetic or an upgraded synthetic. Both of them work, but I've had the CHF, worked in a previous car that I had, and I had a couple of cans left. So I've been using what the original car came with, but some people upgrade to the green can. I don't know if you'll be able to see too well, but I take this little guy, put it down there, and you can see all that fluid coming up. And I just put it over here in my little bowl and squeeze it out. This is just so when I take the accumulators and everything else out, that it doesn't make too much of a mess, because it will make a huge mess. So just keep a towel handy somewhere, because it will make a little bit of a mess. But basically I'm putting it here. I don't know if I reuse it. I might go to the newer fluid now that I have the ability, since I'm draining the whole thing again. But basically, if you don't do this, all this is gonna end up on the floor and it'll make a huge mess. So if you can, take some of it out. Anyways, not gonna show you the whole process, but it shouldn't take too long. It's only a couple of these in there, so. All right, so we've got as much of the power steering fluid out of the reservoir, because again, it's all just like flows down here into the APMU. We've got the inner liner out. So now the next thing we have to do is get the battery out. And the battery is got a bunch of brackets and bolts. You're gonna have to remove the entire thing, because the APMU, of course, sits behind there, in between the rack and pinion, the battery, and so there's not a lot of room. This heater, blower, AC, fan over here, so not a lot of room. So you want to make as much room as possible in here. Also keep in mind that, you know, this might necessarily, because you get a PCC error, be the problem with yours. So it's always better to get a professional to diagnose it for you. I've actually already spent a lot of time, especially with the McLaren Diagnostics tool, trying to figure out, and everything points to the stuck valve on the APMU. And even after I took it out, hit it with a hammer, well, not a hammer, but a mallet, trying to see if we could free it up. It's magnetically based, so there's 3 actuators in there, and they basically control the flow of the fluid, basically increase or decrease the pressure in the lines. And there are sensors and things that tell it what to do. So especially when you turn on the active panel and you put it in sport mode or track mode, that'll determine how much pressure is in the system, so the suspension can get stiffer, you don't have any roll, and also the steering gets a little stiffer. Of course, powertrain also does things to the transmission so that you can get harder, faster shifts, holds the RPMs longer, and it stays in a lower gear, so you're always close to the power band. So anyhow, let's get that off and get the battery out of there and start removing the accumulators. Is going to be the next thing. One pro tip with the battery, especially if you still have the original McLaren battery, always remove this little connector back here. Gosh, I hope you guys can see it. This is what keeps track of, there's a smart board on the battery itself. This is why they cost $3,000 plus for the original one. So you want to move this little red tab here. There's a little red tab right there. And then just squeeze this little thing up here at the top. Let me put this camera down. My LED light. Let's see if I can put in a better spot here. There we go. There you go, and it just unplugs. Put that safely out of the way. So before you disconnect the battery, you want to remove that first, and before you reconnect the battery, you want to plug that in first. Okay. So this is a 10 millimeter. So, and it's up to you if you want to remove. I usually start with the ground. Remove this guy out of the way too, and just typically tuck it under here under the ABS module. And then we're going to remove this guy. This one has a bracket here, also 10 millimeter right here. I won't show you all this boring stuff, but then you have a strap here, and then you want to undo these brackets down here as well. These are the brackets that hold the battery in place. Put new batteries in my light. It was completely dead and I had not noticed. So we've got the power out. I want to show you a couple things here too. Let me put this light over here. So I don't know why McLaren did this, but the power, basically the big power wires are attached to your windshield washer reservoir. No clue why. Anyways, mine's a little cracked down there, which sucks. It leaks a tiny bit, but I'm gonna put some probably super glue or something. Anyways, these 2 bolts are already missing. There's even one down there, but I always put the screw back in there. A lot of these are very similar. These are all the same, 10 millimeter. These back there are 13. You've got a bolt back there to remove that big bracket, so you kind of got to use a little flexi. It's got a flex right there. Would help if I have it in the right setting. Anyways, that is another reason why you want to move that whole wiring harness out of the way, because otherwise you cannot get to these bolts. There's going to be one on this side as well, You can see it right there. So we want to take those out, these on top, and these brackets will come out. Then we can undo this one down here and get that battery out of there. Okay, so let me loosen those up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the bracket. These are the brackets that go in here. So again, you need a 13 for back there, 10 millimeter up front, and a T25 for the little bolts up top. So we got the brackets out. This is a 5/16 bolt. I don't know what that is in millimeters right now, but that holds that bracket in. You can undo that, but I just leave it the way it is. Move that out of the way. This battery is really light. Just be careful with it. It is lithium ion. That's why it costs so much money. And it is still the original one, so I got to take care of this baby because I really don't want to pay for a new one. So we've got the battery out. I'm going to get it out of the way. But down there you can see the infamous APMU. And right next to it are the accumulators. So that is where the hydraulic fluid expands into. There's a little bit of leak in there, but that is from previous works on the system itself. So anyhow, let's get to it. Let's get that bad boy out because that will be the hardest part. As you can see, the you got this weird lip up front, which is what holds the battery in place on the back side. And then you've got all the lines. The ones on the right, A and P, I believe are for the suspension itself, front and rear, or maybe left and right. I can't remember how it goes. And then the B and C are for the rack and pinion. One goes literally directly into the rack and pinion. I believe C is the rack and pinion, and then the other one goes into the reservoir. B goes right up to that reservoir right there. So we got to undo all those. We got to remove the accumulators, which are going to be under pressure, so be careful. Wear goggles or put a towel over it. Usually once you take one out, all the pressure is gone. But then you've got little screws and bolts. I left mine out because I knew I was going to be replacing it with a new one. So I only have one over there, which I think is a 7 or 8. It's a really small screw. And typically there's one on this side, but I'll show you more in a second here. Once I get the battery out, we'll have to undo these lines, undo the accumulators, just because I want the pressure relieved. I don't want to do the top lines and then have those things leaking everywhere. Plus I got to move them to the new unit. So anyhow, let's get to it. Hey, all right, so for this next dance and step, I want to show you, I had to make this special tool. It's just a 22 millimeter, but I had to shave the sides. You can kind of see a little bit on there. I don't know if the camera angle will show it, but basically I had to make it narrow so that it could fit in here. Otherwise, the standard ones won't go in there. So this is just like everything else, clockwise, counterclockwise. So let me put this little camera down here. Hopefully you guys can see. Oops. All right, so we've got the accumulator loose. This is just clockwise, counterclockwise, same thing. Loosey, what is it? Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Put that towel there because it's gonna shoot a lot of overspray and you definitely don't want that in your face. So this is the accumulator I'm removing. By the way, if you ever have a PCC error, typically this is where you would start. Keep that towel on there because again, it's gonna go everywhere. Come on, big fella. Now, it's not pressurized because it hasn't worked. So hopefully, there we go. Normally this shoots out pretty hard, but I've emptied it and it never pressurized. So here we go, here's one. Now we gotta do number 2. And she's loosey-goosey. All right, so let me take that one out as well. And this is why you drain all that fluid too, because normally you'd have a ton of fluid coming out of these. So we can see a little bit of fluid draining on this one. That's why I put the towel there. Not too bad actually. I'm sorry I'm breathing heavy here. I'm like in a weird position too, because this car is so low to the ground and you're leaning very far forward. So now you can loosen this back bracket. It's a huge pain too, but you're gonna have to remove this guy right here to be able to get back there. Otherwise you won't be able to slide this out. Essentially what we want, after I remove the lines too, you want to be able to come back, because normally you have to drop the subframe and that's a massive job. As you can imagine, you got to lift it up, be high enough to where you can get under, take the wheels off, drop the subframe. This is kind of the cheat sheet mode. Not everybody wants to do it this way. Definitely not the recommended way to do it. So proceed at your own risk. I am a YouTube mechanic, which means I'm not a mechanic. So don't do as I do. But this is just for informational purposes. Anyways, Next thing is to remove all the hydraulic lines from the top. Then we'll loosen everything else and get this bracket, get the little bolt back there. There's usually 4 because there's actually a bracket, or this bracket. Normally when you drop the subframe, you'll be able to see under there. And that bracket is what holds the APMU in place. Keeps it from vibrating from the car as well. So there's little screws and bolts that go underneath on the side. I think they're like 7 or 8 millimeters. They're very small, and you got to get all those out. You can see here where I bent the bracket because you also have to do that in order for it to come forward. There's a connector back there, which I'll show you here with the unit that's out, so you guys can see what I'm talking about. That would normally get hung up there. All right, guys, the hardest part of this job is removing the battery strap, the back bracket. This little, it's a 5/18. Again, I don't know what it is in metric. But it goes back there, and it's really a pain. You have very little room to get back there, but you got to get that bracket out, otherwise you won't be able to slide it forward. There's just too many pipes and other things in place to slide the APMU out. There's also going to be 3 connectors in the back. You've got one, you kind of see it over here on the right hand side that you have to unplug, and there's going to be 2 on the back side of the right hand side of the APMU if you're looking from the front back. So let me unplug those. I still have to undo that little, I think that's this guy right here. Actually no, it's smaller than that, and it's smaller than this guy. Yeah, it's like a 7 or 7.5 or something crazy like that. This little guy back here, it is super small, and there's actually one there, one on this side. Again, I left that one removed from the last time I did that job because I knew I was going to be getting a new one if that didn't work. And there's also 2 at the bottom. They go like down there. I don't know if you can see. It's really hard to see. And you can use a little tool like this one, a little wrench, and just kind of do it from the side. You really have to crawl in here and do it. So I left those off too because I knew I was going to be taking this off again. Plus, again, this thing is not going to move. These pipes are so strong in place that if you just put the bracket, the 2 on the side back on there, it'll be more than plenty. Let me get that one on the side, and then we'll be able to unhook these lines and pull that APMU forward. So let's get to it. All right, gents, ladies and gentlemen, wanted to give you a quick update. So you can see I've loosened the hydraulic lines on the top. I used 11/16 for the first 2, C and B. They turn same thing, righty tighty, lefty loosey. And then for the ones over here, I didn't have a wrench for that, but I just used a good old adjustable crescent wrench or whatever you call these bad boys. And just loosen these up. There's going to be a lot of fluid everywhere, so have your towels ready. And again, always be careful. Wear goggles because this might be pressurized somewhere. Typically the system is pressurized. Mine was already put into maintenance mode, and you know, depressurize the system. The pump wasn't working anyways, so once you've got those loose, just a matter of getting these pipes carefully out of the way. And then I just get on, do the left here, unplug the connectors, and this unit will barely squeeze by this freaking lip here for the battery, and then the rack and pinion, because remember, one of those lines goes into the rack and pinion. So for your reference and mine, this is the actual pump right here. So that is the, I forget what that pump is called, but that is the pump that pressurizes the system and will adjust the pressure based on what the panel up front is doing. The APMU uses the magnetic valves and sensors to let that pump know what it needs to do. Then the first one, so that's the pump in the middle, which is B. C is what goes up to the reservoir that we emptied out earlier. And then these are either front and rear suspension or left or right. They're different sizes, so that's how you know those are not going to fit on the left hand side. Just make sure you don't cross these. The way the pipes are laid out, it's pretty hard for you to try to force this in C because it would not make sense. It would be bent and sideways. So again, they kind of all just drop in place, but just for your reference, that's how it works. So larger ones on the right hand side, which go to the suspension, the shocks themselves, front and rear or left and right. And then pump for what is this, B. That's the one I was getting the error on. Either B is stuck or C is stuck, one of the two. When we were using the McLaren Diagnostics tool, even after replacing the accumulators, it still wouldn't work, wouldn't pressurize. So we're hoping that's it, because the pump does work. It's pressurized the system before, but the sensor is the one that's blocking it from pressurizing. So hopefully that's it and not the pump itself. So anyways, let's replace this guy, put the new one in, and go from there. Before I replace the new one, just wanted to show you what the new APMU looks like outside of the car. So that connector right back there, if you try to pull this out, it runs into that bracket. That's why I had to bend that bracket about a 45-degree angle so that I could slide that connector out. So, and then you've got two more back here. Both of these are sensors. These are, by the way, Mercedes-Benz part. So if these ever fails, you can order these for about $30 a piece. And then the connectors go on the top. So again, you're gonna have a bolt here, a bolt on this side. There's gonna be two at the bottom. I think 2 or 3 at the bottom, maybe 2, I can't remember. Those are attached to that little bracket on the subfloor, the subframe right here. So you're gonna have to undo those first before you can pull the whole unit out, plus the 2, plus the connectors, okay? So just take your time with it, go through it, make sure you've removed all those little, bolts and connectors before you try to pull it out and do some damage to either the connectors or the pipes or something like that. So let's get that old one out and start putting the new one back in. All right, guys, let me show you the 2 little connectors back there. You want to unplug those, and literally it's just a little tab. You can do it with your finger and then just kind of pull back as you pull the APMU forward. And also remember the one on this side. So both or all 3 of them just have like a little tab. I wish I could show you better in there. But basically you unplug them, pull that out, lift the lines up a little bit so you have room. The little screw or bolt on the side is a 7mm, the one that goes right there, and on this side as well. And there's going to be 2 at the bottom. So just remember, you got 4 that you have to undo so that it comes loose from that bracket. Otherwise, you have to drop the subfloor and this subframe right here to get to it. If you have a lift, it's much easier to do it that way. Anyways, I've already replaced it. I thought I hit record, so I apologize. I missed unplugging the connectors, but I've got the old one right over here. I apologize about the mess. Got a mess everywhere. So another thing you want to note, let me see if I can get this right here. This one fell off, but the top connector is red, the bottom one is yellow. When you replug these back in, they're a little backwards if you look in there, but you can still switch the connector and plug them in wrongly or incorrectly. So just make sure yellow one, at least in my car, goes at the bottom, and in the new unit, red one goes on top. The wires are also going to have the tape, just like this. If you don't have that, man, that's going to be really tricky, because you're going to have to plug it in, test it, make sure it pressurizes. If it doesn't work, you're going to have to do it again. So red at the top to the red connector, yellow at the bottom to the yellow connector, and then you've got the third one over here. So you can see the little tabs right there. So you basically just stick your finger in there, pull, and it'll lift above that, and you pull the connector out. Remember to bend that bracket. If you're doing it the way I did it, that bracket sits right here. So you're gonna bend it to about a 45-degree angle so that it clears this connector right here. Otherwise, if you try to pull it forward, it's gonna get hung up on that bracket and the bracket on this side. So the APMU definitely won't come out. So just remember, bend the bracket on the left-hand side if you're looking at the front of the vehicle so that you can get in there. And then this one you don't have to bend. But remember to also unscrew the bottom ones, okay? So 1 connector, 2, 3. You've got a screw here, 7mm, another one here, and then there's the 2 at the bottom as well. Or it could be 3, I don't remember, to be honest, but you have to undo those from the bracket so that this can slide forward. All right? Hopefully that helps you guys if you ever have to do this job. I've got the new one back in there. I've plugged the rear ones in, make sure yellow goes to yellow, red to red. Now I got to plug this one on the left-hand side and pop all the lines back in and put the accumulators back on and just basically redo what we undid at the beginning, okay? All right, guys, my battery is dying. Don't have a lot of time left, so hopefully I can get this. But anyways, what I do here, since remember we had to bend that little bracket back there, about 45-degree angle so that the APMU can come out, I put my accumulators back on, and I can use All right, guys, my phone battery, or not my phone, my GoPro battery died twice. They're kind of old. Anyways, I've put everything back together on the APMU, put it all back together, put the accumulators back together. I'm not sure where I left off. So just basically reverse what you did at the beginning, and now I'm putting the battery and the trim and all the other stuff back together. So that's pretty much it. Remember, you're gonna have to repressurize the APMU. Basically, it'll go into maintenance mode, even if you don't have the McLaren Diagnostics tool, because of loss of pressure. So it may pressurize back up. This is the pump right here, reservoir. So it might come back up without using the diagnostics tool, but more than likely, you're gonna have to get the diagnostics tool so you can take it out of maintenance mode and basically put it back in normal operation, which means it'll repressurize. One way that you'll be able to tell is if it's working correctly, the suspension will it'll kind of feel like it's airing up, like you have an air ride suspension. Or you might have one side lower than the other, and that's how you kind of know it might need to be calibrated. But drive it around, check the reservoir. Don't overfill it, just add fluid as you need it. It's pretty dry because I just did the job itself, so it lost all the fluid. So we'll fill it back up, but that's basically all there is to it, and that is how you replace the APMU. Best of luck.